All right, welcome. In this video, I'm going to talk about just kind of some of the Rhino basics, how to orient yourself, what the tools are, that kind of thing. So if you are already familiar with Rhino, you can skip over this one. In the next video, I'll actually explain some of the techniques for drawing plans in 2D. So in this video, I'm just going to show you this is what Rhino looks like when you open it up, or it should look at least similar. So you'll see what are called different viewports, and in those viewports, you're basically looking in different directions. So I'm just scrolling in one viewport to move in and out. Basic navigation, right click to pan. See my little cursor turns into a hand, and I kind of move back and forth, up and down. Um, and you can also orbit. So over here in perspective, I have a kind of 3D view. You can see also, like, because of as you see, my grid is kind of tapering like it would in a perspective view. So in here, if I right click and drag, I'm orbiting. So I'm kind of rotating my view like so. And I can also tilt a top view or a paraline view into 3D if I want to. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to work in 2D in this view. And just to explain the viewport, so I can draw over here. I have my solids modeling tools. A lot of the tools you'll use most often are here in this default toolbar. So over here, I have, obviously that's a box. With each of these, there's also like a bunch of tools kind of underneath. If you click on the little corner of the icon, you can get a bunch of different. And if you hover your mouse, it'll give you a little description. But so I can draw a box, and the other thing that's great about Rhino is it's kind of a command line based software, much like AutoCAD if you're familiar with that. So up at the top here, I have my command line. And it keeps a history of everything I'm doing, or all the commands I've used. So if I click on my box again, the other thing that is really super useful in Rhino is it gives you prompts about what it's asking for in order to complete a command, or some of the options you have for doing a command in different ways. So I'll just draw a box somewhere. It's asking me first corner of base. So it's basically asking me to click somewhere and specify where the corner of the base is. Now it's saying other corner of base or length. So I have the option of clicking somewhere else, or at this point I can actually type in numbers on my keyboard and hit enter. So if I wanted to make a 12 by 10, or make it like really different before. So sorry, now it's asking me for the width, so I'll type in 24, and then I just hit enter on the keyboard. Now it's asking me for a height. If you look over to the right in my perspective view, again, I can specify a height, or I can type in a number, 6, press enter. And so now I have a rectangle that's, I guess also, I'm in a certain units here. I'm in millimeters right now. I'll show you how to change that. But it's 12 by 24 by 6. And so the reason I did that is so you can see now in my front and in my right viewports, I'm looking at the same object, but from different directions, right? Kind of like when you draw a section in one direction or in another direction, or we kind of call these different projections in architecture. So it's like you're looking in different planes or in different objects. I know. And so the plane or the grid you see here, and you also get an icon and kind of a preview of your orientation with the little widget in the corner of the viewport. You can see in the perspective, it's giving me a 3-directional coordinate system icon showing what direction I'm. So in Rhino, you have X, you have Y, and you have Z. So everything is kind of positioned along those 3 coordinates in space. You also have what's known as an origin to the file. So for example, if I were to draw just a regular 2D rectangle, so I clicked on the rectangle tool. If I wanted to draw it right at a particular point in order to kind of track how far things are based on a grid, I can also, rather than clicking, I can actually specify coordinates, like by typing in an XYZ set of numbers. And the way I would do that is by typing in 0, 2, 5, or 6 there, sorry, and press enter. And so now you can see my point is at the first corner of my rectangle is at that point. And again, I could do the same thing. I could type in a number, or I could click, I could type in a coordinate with commas, X, Y, and Z, or I could type in a number for the length, or I could click somewhere in my viewport to draw the other corner of it. So what we're going to do in this first assignment will be all in 2D. So we're just going to use the top viewport. So you can maximize or minimize the viewports by double clicking on the little title in the top left corner. You also, when you click in a different viewport, you'll see that the that title gets highlighted. So that's how you know which viewport you're active in. You also can click the little drop-down menu, and there's a whole series of options for your viewport. You can change your view. So you go to set view. I could change this top viewport into a perspective viewport, and I could change it back into a top viewport. I can also change the display properties. So right now I'm in wireframe, which means I'm just looking at the edges of everything. Everything's kind of like see-through. But what I drew originally was a solid, was something that has a surface. And so if I change my viewport into shaded, you can see it shows that box as like a shaded object with dimension. So again, we're just going to do 2D, so I won't get too much into the 3D stuff for now, but so you're aware. The other thing down at the bottom, I can navigate through I have one of them maximized. Navigate through my viewports there, those tabs. The other thing I wanted to mention is some of the other menus that you may not see by default. I'm not sure really. The layers menu is something that will be really, really helpful to you in Rhino. It'll help you stay organized. So when you put objects on different layers, you can turn them on and off. You can lock them so they don't get messed up. You can change their properties in a number of ways. And the way that we're going to line weight our drawing will actually be through the layers when we do our 2D drawing. If you don't see the layers panel, down here at the bottom where it says default, that means that we have the default layer set as current. Right now, that's the only layer in my file. I could make a new layer by clicking the little new layer button, and I could name it whatever I want. I could call this my rectangle, and I could call this my cube. And then so these objects are not yet on those layers because I've drawn them on my current layer, which is default. So down here, I can see what layer I have as current, and I can also change the current layer. I can also double click on that. But if I don't have the layers panel open, close it really quick. Double click. Oh, sorry, right click on it. So if you just right click down there where the layers are supposed to be, or where it shows you what your current layer is, it'll open the layers panel. And these you can just drag around and dock them. You can dock them as tabs, or you can dock it as its own little window. Okay, so those are layers. Now, if I wanted to actually put these objects on those layers, I would have to select them, right click on the layer, and go to change object layer. So now now my rectangle is on the layer rectangle. If I turn it off, it disappears, but it's still there. It's just not visible. And if I lock it, then I won't be able to move it or highlight it or anything. I can also change properties about the appearance of it. So I have what's called the display color in this little square here. If I click on that square, I get a color menu. I can choose anything from a color wheel or from a series of default colors. And you can see my rectangle will appear in that color in my viewport. We can apply materials, which is something we would do if we were rendering. We're not doing that now. We could change the line type. So a line type is like, dashed or solid or dotted or something. So again, I would just click on that to see what my options are. There's also ways to change those, which I'll show you in the next video. And then I also have what's called a print color. So I have a display color that's useful to identify what things are on what layers just visually in my viewport. But I also have a print color so that when I go to print, I don't get all these wacky colors. I get like, you know, whatever colors I want to print to. And most often I'll just keep that black or some kind of gray tone because I'm printing black and white. And then I also have something called a print width, which is the equivalent of a line weight. So again, we can print to a certain color, and we can also print with the lines at a certain thickness. So if I change that, you won't see it, but when I go to print, you would see it. So that's how we're going to line weight our drawings later on. And so the same with my cube, I could put that on that layer and turn it on and off. So we're going to use layers to line weight our drawings, but it's also just like incredibly, useful to put things on layers as you're working, just to stay organized and yeah, to be easily able to select things. There's a whole lot of benefits to working that way. So the other thing I wanted to mention was the properties panel. So up here I have a panel called the properties. I can get to any of these views usually, or these windows, menus, I should say, usually by just typing in the word for it. So like if I type in like, it'll open the layer menu again with it off. So that's another way to get to the layer menu. If you don't see the properties menu, likewise, just type in properties. And also Rhino does this nice thing where it'll auto-complete and also show you what other commands there are with the same word or parts of words in what you've typed in. So that's helpful. And if you know there's a certain command but you don't quite know exactly what it's called, properties. So yeah, so the properties panel will give me a lot of useful information and allow me to change things as well. So I can select my rectangle there. And again, I can see that my object is on the layer rectangle. I can see the display color, the print width, print color. So right now I'm keeping this all by layer. And that's easy because as I draw, I'll draw a bunch of stuff on a certain layer and I want them all to just be able to change them with one click, which enables me, or which I'm able to do with layer. So if I edit the layer, everything on that layer changes. But you can, if you want to, you can also like change the properties of individual objects, properties panel. Okay, so that's, I think, enough about that. The other thing that I'll just point out is if you ever don't know, like if you wonder if there's a command that does something, but you don't know really what all the commands are, there's also up at the top, there's kind of all these different drop-down lists that show you what you can do. So like view, for example, has a lot of the same options that I saw when I clicked the drop-down in my viewport menu. Curve shows me all the different tools I have for drawing curves, surfaces, solids, meshes, dimensioning objects, drawing, transforming objects, scaling them up and down, and rotating them, mirroring them, distorting them in strange ways, all that stuff. So everything, every tool that there is in Rhino will be somewhere in those menus. Look through that. And then the last thing that I'll explain will be the units. So down here at the bottom, I can also see that I'm in millimeters. And if I type in units in the command line, I open up a menu. So this is actually the document properties menu. A lot of things, a lot of options that you'll change just about your file will be in this menu. So if I wanted to get to that just in general, I could type type in options. That's what it is. That's how you get to the options menu. And so right now I'm back on units because that's where I was when I closed it. But you can also go straight to this section of the options menu by typing in units. And I have two types of units here. This is important to remember. I have my model units, which is like my workspace here. And so over on the right, I can choose what units I want to work with. For most things, architecture scale, you'll use feet. You can also change the display precision down here if you want to like measure stuff and to a certain accuracy. I'll just leave that as default. There's no from what it is. But that's like my model space. That's where I'm drawing here. But when we go to print, you'll see there's also a thing called layout space. It's exactly the same concept as paper space in AutoCAD. And so we can actually like make sheets in Rhino of a certain size. We can lay out drawings on them. We can write on them and stuff like that, and print those sheets directly to PDF or to a printer, which is really helpful for making drawings. So if we wanted to make a layout right now, again, we'd be making our layout in millimeters, whereas we probably want to be working in. So I'll also change my layout units to there, and I'll click OK. It's going to ask me if I want to scale stuff because right now everything's in millimeters. So basically, I can hit yes, which means that everything will actually remain the same size, but it'll become like a different measurement, right? Because before it was in millimeters, now it's in feet. If I hit no, everything will have the same number of units. So like that box that I drew would go from being 6 by 12 by 24 millimeters to being 6 by 12 by 24 feet. So anyway, you can also just scale stuff after. You can also hit Control Z, do what you want it to do. So I'll just click no to keep stuff kind of the same units rather than size. And that's kind of the general gist of it. Oh yeah, down here. So also when you're doing stuff in Rhino with curves, you'll notice that when you select them, or at least when you select only one at a time, you'll get the points, the control points of that curve. They'll appear. And in Rhino, I can move stuff kind of just by grabbing it and dragging it around. So I just move the corner point and change the shape of that rectangle. I can hit Edit, Undo, or Control Z to undo stuff. I can Control Y or Edit, Redo to redo stuff. Those are two commands we use constantly. But we can also, like, if I wanted to draw another rectangle, and rather than specifying where I want it to go, I want to just like snap it to this existing rectangle. So there's a thing called snaps in Rhino, and down here at the bottom, there's all these little buttons that turn stuff on and off, grid and ortho and planar and OSNAP. So OSNAP stands for object snaps. So down here, just above there, if I uncheck OSNAP, all that gets grayed out. So these are exactly what the OSNAPs are that I'm utilizing. So I think when you first open Rhino, OSNAPs is off. So you'll have to turn it on, and you'll also have to like click some of these to make them turned on. And so I have an end OSNAP, which allows me to snap to like the ends of lines. I have a midpoint, which allows me to snap to the middle of lines. I have a near, which allows me to snap to any point along the line. And you can see the little speech bubble next to my cursor tells me which snap it's like is activated at a point in time. So I like to keep end and near, point, mid, and intersection and perpendicular turned on. Vertex is just for meshes, so you won't really do that too much. Okay, so that'll like allow me to snap to this up. Good. There's also a thing called Smart Track, which allows me to kind of project my snaps. So you see what I did there was clicked on one point, and then I held my mouse on another point to kind of, you see the cursor like changed color there. So like right now there's no point at that corner. And when I drop my mouse on it, the little point turned from black to gray. And then as I move my mouse away, it turns blue. So that means I'm projecting that snap now. You can see I'm snapping my line to a projection of that point. Okay, so that should just about conclude the intro to Rhino interface. And in the next video, I'll actually get into some of the stuff that you'll do to draw a plan. So, here.